You think you know what petty looks like. You think you've seen the depths of suburban entitlement. But until you've stood in your driveway at dawn, watching the steam rise off a cup of stale coffee, while a woman in a luxury parka tells you that destroying your dead wife's legacy is actually a community enhancement, you haven't seen anything yet. My name is Elias Thorne, a man who spent 32 years keeping the city's water running and the roads paved. A retired public works specialist who just wanted to fade quietly into the background of Oakhaven Ridge, the gated community where my wife, Martha, and I thought we'd found our forever home back in the late 90s. But forever has a funny way of getting cut short, doesn't it? Martha left me last winter, taken by a cancer that moved faster than the seasons, leaving me alone in a big empty house with nothing but memories and the rose garden she'd spent 5 agonizing years cultivating. A patch of vibrant life that was her final middle finger to the disease, her way of saying, I was here, and I made something beautiful. And after she passed, her mother, Eleanor, a retired librarian with a heart as fragile as fine china, moved in so I could look after her, which was the only thing keeping me upright some days. We were managing, just 2 quiet souls trying to survive the grief, until Veronica Sterling rolled into town, a high-powered real estate shark driving a pristine white Lucid Air, a woman who looked at the world as if everything in it was a smudge on her glasses that needed to be wiped away. And almost immediately, she clawed her way to the presidency of the Oakhaven Ridge Homeowners Association, turning our peaceful neighborhood into her own personal fiefdom. The trouble started in December, when the sky opened up and dropped 18 inches of heavy, wet snow on the city, the kind of storm that silences everything, muffling the world in white. But instead of the peaceful quiet of winter, I woke up to the mechanical shrieking of reverse gears and the grinding of steel on asphalt, a sound that wasn't moving past my house, but was converging on it. I looked out the kitchen window, expecting to see the city plows clearing the main artery, but what I saw froze the blood in my veins colder than the air outside, because there were 3 massive dump trucks, contracted by the HOA, backing up not to the street easement, but right up to the edge of my property line, their tires chewing up the dormant grass, their exhaust pipes belching black smoke into the pristine morning air. I saw Veronica standing there, wrapped in a white designer coat that probably cost more than my first car, pointing a gloved finger directly at Martha's memorial garden, that sacred patch of earth where the prize-winning roses were sleeping for the winter, and with a signal from her hand, the trucks engaged their hydraulics, the beds lifted, and tons of gray, slushy, salt-laden sludge cascaded down, burying the garden, burying the driveway, burying my heart under a 12-foot wall of toxic ice. I ran outside, boots unlaced, shouting, waving my arms. But the drivers just looked at Veronica, who didn't even acknowledge my existence. She just checked something off on her clipboard, as if burying an old man's home was just another line item on the morning agenda. And by the time I reached the edge of the pile, the trucks were rumbling away, leaving me staring at a mountain of filth that blocked my garage, blocked my front door, and effectively sealed Eleanor and me inside our own home like rats in a trap. The smell hit me first, not the clean scent of snow, but the chemical sting of industrial road salt and de-icing fluid, a mixture so potent I could taste it on my tongue, and I just knew with a sickening certainty that nothing would ever grow in that soil again, that Martha's roses were burning to death under that chemical weight. I turned back to the house and saw Eleanor at the window, her face pale, pressing her hand against her chest, holding up her empty prescription bottle, and the panic set in, real and sharp, because she needed that medication. The pharmacy delivery driver couldn't possibly get through this barricade, and we were trapped. But the insult, the true twist of the knife, came the next morning in the mail. A crisp envelope with the Oakhaven Ridge logo embossed in gold, containing a notice of violation stamped in angry red ink, fining me $500 for unsightly accumulation of debris and failure to maintain driveway accessibility, charging me for the very mess they had dumped on my land, threatening liens if I didn't clear it within 48 hours. I was shaking, not from the cold, but from a rage that felt ancient. So I took the citation and walked to Veronica's house for the emergency board meeting she'd scheduled, walking past driveways that were scraped clean, black asphalt shining in the sun, proving that the community maintenance was a selective service reserved for those who kissed the ring. Inside Veronica's living room, which smelled of vanilla and arrogance, for board members sat around a glass table, looking everywhere but at me, while Veronica smiled that terrifying, tight-lipped smile and slid a document toward me, claiming it was a community maintenance agreement I'd allegedly signed, agreeing to accept snow storage for the greater good of the neighborhood. I looked at the signature on the bottom of the page, and the room seemed to tilt on its axis, because the name read Elias Thorne, but the handwriting was angular, jagged, lacking the loop in the E and the flourish on the T that I've used for 50 years, a forgery so blatant it was almost insulting. And when I looked up and called it a fraud, Veronica just arched an eyebrow and asked if I was calling the board liars, while Bill Oakley, the only board member with a conscience, shifted uncomfortably in his seat and looked at his shoes. Meeting adjourned, she snapped, dismissing me like a servant. But as I walked out into the cold night, clutching that forged document, the old instincts from my days in public works woke up, the part of me that knows that bureaucrats always leave a paper trail, and if they don't, they dig their own graves. I spent the next morning at the county clerk's office, my eyes blurring from scanning microfiche and digital records, looking for this alleged agreement, and sure enough, it didn't exist, not in the original charter, not in any amendment. The only rule on the books was that snow had to be hauled off-site to a designated facility, which meant Veronica wasn't just breaking HOA rules, she was breaking the law. But before I could even formulate a plan, the phone rang. It was Eleanor, her voice weak and trembling, telling me she'd tried to navigate the narrow, icy goat path I'd shoveled through the drift to get the mail, and she'd slipped, falling hard on the ice. And now she couldn't get up, and the ambulance I called had to park 2 houses down because they couldn't get through the blockade Veronica had ordered. Watching the paramedics struggle to carry a stretcher with my 78-year-old mother-in-law over a mountain of frozen sludge, slipping and cursing, while Veronica's heated driveway steamed gently in the distance, something inside me snapped. Something essential and fundamental shifted from grief to cold, hard calculation, and I decided right then and there that I wasn't just going to fight them, I was going to end them. I sat in the hospital waiting room, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like a trapped fly, holding Eleanor's hand while she slept off the pain meds for her bruised ribs, thanking whatever gods were listening that nothing was broken, but the image of her lying helpless in the snow was burned into my retinas, fueling a slow-burning fire in my gut. I pulled out my phone and called Marcus Vance, an old friend from the union days who'd pivoted to property law, a man with a voice like gravel and a mind like a steel trap. And when I told him about the dumping, the forgery, and the fall, he went quiet for a long time before telling me that what the HOA was doing wasn't just a violation of bylaws. It was criminal trespass and endangerment. But we needed proof. We needed to let them hang themselves with their own arrogance. The escalation didn't take long. Just 2 weeks later, another storm hit, and Veronica decided to double down, sending trucks not just with street snow, but with loads she'd clearly contracted from commercial lots, stuff mixed with sand, trash, and heavy industrial de-icers that turned the pile in my yard into a multicolored, toxic landfill that reached the second-story gutters, blocking out the sun and turning our living room into a cave. I took samples of the soil once the thaw started, sending them to a private lab, and the results that came back were terrifying. Levels of chlorides and heavy metals 20 times the legal limit for residential zones, a chemical cocktail that had sterilized Martha's garden so thoroughly that I half expected the earth to glow in the dark. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about snow. It was about erasure, about Veronica trying to bully the eyesore truck-driving retiree out of her perfect neighborhood. Then came the offer. A letter slipped into my mailbox proposing a Snow Depot lease agreement. A generous offer of $50 a year, $50, for the HOA to have permanent, year-round rights to use my corner lot as a dump for snow, landscaping debris, and construction waste, essentially turning my home into the community trash can, a document that made me laugh out loud in the empty kitchen because it was so audaciously evil. But it was while I was digging through the original subdivision maps at the county surveyor's office, looking for ammo to fight the lease, that I found the holy grail, the smoking gun, the nuclear launch code buried in a faded 1987 plat map that Veronica had clearly never bothered to read. My property, the corner lot that Martha and I had bought because it had the big oak tree, wasn't just a plot of land. According to the original deed and the easement filings, my property line actually extended across the entrance to the community, meaning the private road that led to all 47 houses in Oakhaven Ridge was legally landlocked, and the only access point, the literal gateway to the public world, ran through an easement on my land. I called Sam Harrow, a surveyor buddy, to confirm it, and he stood there with his laser levels and GPS gear, grinning like a schoolboy as he pounded stakes into the ground, confirming that legally, the easement existed solely on the condition of good faith neighborly cooperation, a clause that Veronica had shattered into a million pieces the moment she dumped toxic waste on my wife's roses. "You hold the keys to the castle, Elias," Sam said, tying a neon pink ribbon around a steel stake. "If they violate the good faith clause, you have the right to revoke access or, at the very least, restrict it for maintenance and safety inspections." The plan that formed in my mind was intricate and beautiful, a mechanism of clockwork justice. So I went to the equipment rental yard and spoke to a guy named Randy, renting a massive cat excavator with a specialized hydraulic snowblade, a beast of a machine capable of moving mountains, and I ordered heavy-duty steel bollards and logging chains, telling everyone it was for a security perimeter project. Veronica must have sensed she was losing control because she sent a cease and desist letter on legal letterhead from a firm called Prestwick & Cole, threatening me with a lawsuit if I didn't sign the lease. But when I called the firm to clarify the case number, the managing partner, a confused man named David Prestwick, told me they didn't represent any HOA and certainly hadn't sent the letter, confirming that Veronica had committed mail fraud and impersonated an attorney, a felony that would make the state bar very interested. I had her on fraud. I had her on trespassing. I had her on environmental damage. But I didn't want a settlement check yet. I wanted a lesson. I wanted them to feel the isolation they had forced on Eleanor. I wanted them to understand that the social contract is a two-way street. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when the weather forecast predicted the storm of the century. A blizzard roaring down from Canada that promised 2 feet of snow, and I sat in the garage, polishing the controls of the excavator, listening to the wind howl, knowing that Veronica would try one last crushing blow, one last dump to bury me forever. At midnight, the trucks arrived, led by Veronica's Lucid, and I watched from the darkened window as she directed them, waving her arms like a conductor, ordering them to pile the snow even higher, to pack it against the windows, to crush the memorial bench I'd built for Martha, and I saw the flash of her phone as she took selfies with the destruction, documenting her cruelty for social media. I let them finish. I let them pile every single snowflake from the entire neighborhood onto my land. I let them build the ammunition dump that I was about to detonate. And when they finally drove away, leaving us buried in silence, I walked out into the storm, patted the cold steel of the excavator, and whispered to the ghost of my wife, "Watch this, honey. This one's for you." The dawn broke gray and heavy, the air biting at my exposed skin as I climbed into the cab of the excavator at 5:30 a.m., the diesel engine rumbling to life with a deep, guttural growl that vibrated through my bones, a sound of raw power that felt like justice clearing its throat. I didn't just move the snow. I sculpted it, driving the machine into the 22-foot mountain of toxic slush Veronica had gifted me, scooping up massive blade loads of ice, road salt, and debris, and tracking it deliberately, precisely, to the exact edge of my property line, the bottleneck where the private road of Oakhaven Ridge met the city street. I built a wall, a magnificent, insurmountable berm of dirty snow, 6 feet high and 10 feet deep, sealing the entrance to the community completely, packing it down with the excavator's bucket until it was hard as concrete. And then, just to make sure the message was clear, I installed the steel bollards Sam had marked out, running a heavy chain between them with a sign that read, "Private property. Easement revoked due to violation of used terms." By 7 a.m., the first cars started to line up, a parade of confusion that quickly turned into panic. Frank, the neighbor who never waved, sat in his SUV honking his horn, while others got out, wandering around in their office shoes, staring at the white barricade that had materialized overnight, trapping 47 families in their luxury prison. Then Veronica arrived, sliding her white electric car sideways in her haste, stumbling out into the snow in those ridiculous boots, screaming, her face contorted in a mask of pure fury, pointing at me as I sat high in the cab, the master of the impasse. "You can't do this," she shrieked, her voice cracking in the cold air. "This is illegal. I'll have you arrested." But I just powered down the engine, opened the door, and looked down at her with the calmness of a man who has read the fine print. "Morning, Veronica," I called out, my voice carrying over the murmuring crowd. "Just doing some property maintenance, returning the community's generous donation to the only designated easement area available per the municipal code." The police and fire department arrived 20 minutes later, sirens wailing, summoned by Veronica's frantic 911 calls claiming a hostage situation. But when Officer Miller and the fire chief stepped out and saw the survey stakes, saw the documentation I calmly handed them, and saw the mountain of toxic waste clearly originating from the HOA's illegal dumping, the dynamic shifted instantly. Officer Miller looked at Veronica, then at the wall, then at me, and said the words that broke her. "Ma'am, this is a civil dispute regarding private property usage. Unless you have a court order granting you access across this man's land, he has every right to block it if the easement terms were violated, especially given the environmental hazards you've created here." The news van from Channel 8 pulled up, with reporter Jessica Lynn jumping out, sensing a viral story. And that was the moment, the climax of the theater, where I looked into the camera and told the world. They buried my wife's memorial garden. They trapped my elderly mother-in-law, and they forged my signature to do it. I'm just showing them that you can't push a man forever and expect him not to push back. The standoff lasted 4 hours, ending only when the remaining board members, led by a terrified Bill Oakley, literally wrote a personal check on the hood of a police car for $28,000, covering all damages, legal fees, and immediate restoration costs, while Veronica stood alone in the snow, watching her power evaporate as the neighbors turned their backs on her, realizing she was the villain of the story. We cleared the road by noon, but the victory went deeper than the snow. Veronica was ousted from the board that night, facing criminal fraud charges and a lawsuit from the law firm she impersonated, eventually selling her house and fleeing the state in shame, while the settlement money paid for a complete remediation of the soil. 3 months later, the sun was warm on my face as I sat on the bench, watching Eleanor plant new rose bushes in the rich, imported dark soil, the garden expanding larger and more beautiful than before, a testament to resilience. And as the neighbors walked by, some waving, some stopping to apologize, I realized that we had reclaimed our home. But as I watch the roses bloom today, I ask you this. When the systems designed to protect a community are weaponized by the petty and the power-hungry, does the moral obligation to be the bigger person still apply? Or is catastrophic retaliation the only language a bully truly understands? Does true justice require mercy, or does it require a bulldozer? Tell me what you would have done in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe, because in this neighborhood, we finally learned that respect is the only currency that matters.